we can definitely pick it up in the data that we see that in South Africa, for example, in the first half of 2026, we saw that South Africans received about 17 billion spam calls. I mentioned earlier that it is really about relying on two elements. The one is building trust through people and humans and not removing them from the AI conversation. It's really about building augmented intelligence on the one end. And on the other end is really how do organizations then adapt everything that they do and think about value creation and think about how they communicate in a better sense with their customers.
How's it, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Exponential Africa, where we're bringing you the very best in thought leadership, technology, and innovation. Artificial intelligence is unlocking extraordinary new possibilities. We can generate content in seconds, build businesses faster than ever before, communicate across languages instantly, and automate work at a scale we never imagined. But there's another side to this revolution. The same AI that helps us create can also help bad actors deceive. Deepfakes are becoming more convincing, scams are becoming more personalized, fraud is becoming automated, and for the first time in human history, we're entering in a world where we're seeing is no longer just believing, which raises one of the biggest questions of the new AI era. How do we build trust when intelligence can be artificially generated? Joining me today to discuss this is none other than Mmathebe Zvobwo, Director of Market Development for South Africa at Truecaller, one of the world's leading digital trust platforms, helping hundreds of millions of people identify unknown calls, block fraud, and create more trusted communication. Today, we're going to discuss why trust, not just technology, may become the defining competitive advantage of the AI economy. Mmathebe, welcome to Exponential Africa.
Hi, Mick. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast. I look forward to the conversation and really super eager to get into it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining. And I think it's really critical for our audience to think about this trust economy where AI, fraud, and Africa's digital future is at play here. So, Mmathebe, I wanted to ask you, let's start off with just talking about the idea of exponential technologies at Singularity. We discuss this a lot. And as a Truecaller, how are you viewing this AI explosion, particularly through the lens of Africa's future?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Mick, for the question. I'd like to take a step back, right? Because I normally look at this from a leadership behavior and thinking perspective. What should leaders on the continent be thinking about in the era of AI and exponential change? We know that the J curve typically for exponential technologies first dips and then accelerates as companies really try to figure out how to adapt and what else they should be thinking about. So actually, as leaders do this on the continent, the first sort of paradox that they face, and there are multiple paradoxes, as you say, AI introduces multiple paradoxes, but I want to actually highlight three in our conversation. So the first paradox is this, what I call the profitability paradox. And we've seen now that a lot of companies have really come out and adopted AI at a task level, and they've seen productivity improvements at a task level. However, very few have seen the profitability required to actually say AI is now their competitive advantage, or they've given themselves, or they've found a competitive advantage from the adoption of AI. Caspian One reported that only 38% of projects actually result in the required return of investment when AI is being adopted. So actually, I think that the issue is not necessarily the adoption of AI or the fastest AI or the smartest AI. It is really adaptation. And adaptation is absolutely critical for organizations in the world of exponential change. We're seeing it at Truecaller because this world is absolutely riddled with multiple paradoxes, as I've said, which leads me to the second paradox, which is the human capital paradox. Now, we've seen how many companies have gone on to replace workers or have attempted to replace workers with artificial intelligence. But actually, what matters the most in adaptation, one of the elements is your people. So people actually become your moat in a world where intelligence is abundant, and essentially where your competitors have access to the very same information. The difference actually results in people and human capital, because really, at the end of the day, intelligence is one element, but actually the shaping of knowledge, the verification of some of the content that comes out of AI, the contextualization, all of that actually is determined by your people as an organization. And so
Yeah.
we see this at Truecaller because we actually use artificial intelligence in line, as well as our community. So we've got 500 million users across the world, and we find
Wow.
that we're able to localize our fraud detection. We're able to localize, um, spam patterns all across various markets that Truecaller operates in. And this is really our moat. The moat is that it's both artificial intelligence and people. And so, again, that human capital paradox is super important to navigate as an African leader, because it's not just about rushing to replace people. And for us, we care about tomorrow's communication, to make sure that it is smarter, it's safer, and it's more efficient. We see that because we're already seeing how spam calls have accelerated, not just spam, but fraudulent calls as well as communication.
So
All
I
right.
think this is really fascinating, and it's truly remarkable how, as AI is advancing, to the AI guardrails and what
Yeah.
you're doing at Truecaller is protecting people. As a tool, it can advance you and it can help you, but you can also protect others. So I just
Yeah.
want to just dive a little bit into around the idea of that. 500 million customers. Truecaller is an exponential business.
It is.
It's a lot of users. Some would say it's probably one of the biggest platforms around with that many users.
Yeah.
Um, and how do you actually manage the data across all of that? It seems like is it segmented into different countries and regions? Because it's quite a tall order to make sure you're almost like guardrailing across
Yes.
these different regions.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, we are a data-led business, and the reason why our business is this massive from a user perspective is that the problem resonates, right? So the problem of trust resonates across multiple markets. And again, it's another lesson, by the way, for African leaders as you're building. What is the unique problem that Africa has that that you think that the rest of the world will actually need? And that's one of the ways to achieve massive scale. But in terms of the data perspective, is that there are various signals that we read from a machine. We started off reading them from a machine learning perspective. And those signals are essentially mainly universal across multiple markets, but actually get localized through the community intelligence that I spoke about. So, for example, there are various fraud activities that happen in the local context that get flagged on our app in local language or even with local context. And so I don't want to name others, but of course there's so many others that we've seen that are localized, from whether it's mashonisas, whether it is a SARS related fraudulent or scam call. So our community is actually the moat, or the secret sauce, in terms of how we're able to localize and figure out what that signal really is. And of course, on the back end of that, it is fueled by AI in terms of being able to read those dimensions and to segment them from a behavior perspective. And that's how actually we're able to figure out from in over 175 countries what a particular scam call or fraud call would possibly look like in that local market.
Amazing, yeah. So I think let's drill into now what you call the security paradox.
Yes.
AI is creating this incredible innovation while simultaneously making scams and deepfakes much more sophisticated. I had my mother-in-law was called by somebody that sounded like her daughter, and very hard to tell that it's not. So, what is the data telling you about South Africa today?
Yeah, so I mean, all across the world, we're seeing that AI is really changing the economics of trust. Just last night, as I was preparing for this podcast, I saw a report by Interpol, which looked at cybercrime on the African continent. And it showed how AI has lowered the barriers essentially to cybercrime, and that there's this concept of cybercrime as a service, right? So actually that cybercrime infrastructure is already, it's readily available for any bad actor that wants to plug into it and almost commit fraud or scam
DDoS
individuals.
attacks or scams. Yeah, you can buy
Exactly.
for $40 a hacker or something. You know, they're actually quite.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're seeing that, and we can definitely pick it up in the data that we see that in South Africa, for example, in the first half of 2026, we saw that South Africans received about 17 billion spam calls. Now that is
Wow.
that
17
includes
billion.
17 billion, 17 billion, and that includes fraudulent calls, that includes scam calls, right? That includes spam calls, and that
Voice
is
cloning. Is it voice cloning and
voice cloning is in there. Um,
phishing attacks?
Phishing attacks, smishing attacks with SMS as well. So we've seen that on calls, we've seen that on messages, and that's actually a year-on-year increase of about 25% from the same period. So, which tells you that yes, it is accelerating. Fraudulent attacks are accelerating. Cybercrime is accelerating. I saw that the World Economic Forum the other day also listed AI threats as increasing and accelerating. 77% of CEOs identified that AI related threats are increasing. So, from my end, I mean, you mentioned things like voice cloning. We do rely on technology as well to be able to figure out whether the voice on the other side is an authentic voice, right? So through features like AI call scanner on the Truecaller app, specifically available on our Android phone, we're able to protect loved ones. Like you said, you could get a call from your mom saying, "Hey, Mick, it's me. I am, at Woolies or wherever your mom is, can you please send me your banking details," or whatever the case is. And so that is so easy to do with AI. But at the same time, really, I mentioned earlier that it is really about relying on two elements. The one is building trust through people and humans, and
Yes.
not removing them from the AI conversation. And not it's really about building augmented intelligence on the one end, and on the other end is really how do organizations then adapt everything that they do, and think about value creation and think about how they communicate in a better sense with their customers, because ultimately, um, you know, customers need to be able to consume products and services, but they can only do so when they trust that the product and service that they're receiving is genuine, and it comes from a genuine organization. So communications actually then becomes one of those pillars that organizations should be actually looking at. I mean, we are really looking at transforming that process from a business core perspective. It's no longer just about reaching customers. In the world of AI, people are asking questions. Can I really trust this core? And that's
Yeah,
what
and I think that's what's so powerful about Truecaller and just being able to protect folks. Like my mom also got a call from one of these fake calls, and thankfully she phoned me to say, "Hey, they asked me for my SIM card, and I gave it to them." I'm like, so I said to her, are you crazy? You've just given them access to your phone and your bank and all of this." And then I went to visit her, and I found out that she can't see that well anymore. So she gave them the wrong PIN code number for 20 minutes over and over again. And they eventually gave up, the scammers, because she wasn't
yeah,
giving them the right number, the right OTP number. So, like,
yeah, and
what's it looking like on the ground for you in terms of this organized crime?
yeah, so I mean, it's very interesting to really look at some of the data and research that's out there, right? So the first is when you understand the South African context, we have over 190% mobile penetration. That's the first thing. Um, we have over 79% internet penetration, and about 50% to even 60% smartphone penetration. So it's no surprise, it's no wonder that South Africa is, receiving increased attacks, particularly on the smartphone, on phones, and digital fraud as well. So we're seeing that, but also external sources actually corroborate that. So, for example, TransUnion came out and also spoke about how South Africa is one of the most, it's the top African country that receives such targets, and that actually, on average, the median fraud loss is about 11,000 rand.
Wow.
So contrast that in a country where the median wage is about 6,000 to 7,000 rand. So just contrast that and see how that is, not just a nice to have to protect customers or for individuals to protect themselves. It's actually almost close to survival, right? And you spoke about your mom, and that's why we've got features like family protection, where you can literally, through a family group, protect the most vulnerable members. So in this
Oh,
instance, you would have been able to directly intervene while seeing that she's actually been on the phone with these scammers for like 20 minutes. You'd have been able to intervene on an Android phone. And on an iPhone, you're actually able to set the parameters to say, do you block all scammers, all fraudulent calls, or don't you? And so we're seeing this on the ground as well. And that's why, our users actually use features like family protection and so on.
I didn't know that. I'm going to definitely check that out because she needs it,
That's good. No, she
Luckily,
does.
she
Yeah.
gave them the wrong OTP. I think she made them so upset after so long. But that was, that
Yeah.
was just one random lucky chance. Most, hopefully, most people don't get scammed, but a lot do. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
talking about, let's move on to this idea of digital trust evolving with
Mhm.
more AI agents coming into the world. There's authentication, there's agent identity, verified communications. How are you seeing this digital trust evolve in
Yeah.
this AI world?
Well, AI has actually made trust super fundamental because in the past, seeing was believing. Literally, if there was video evidence of you speaking to someone you should not have spoken to, you could get away with it, right? You could not have gotten away with it, right? In
Yes.
today's world, you just simply cannot get away with it because you actually could say, well, that's possibly AI generated. So the key thing here with AI is that, firstly, as I said earlier, intelligence and knowledge is ubiquitous; it's everywhere. Secondly, you know, bad actors also have access to the same AI algorithms and tools with different intentions.
More,
And
they've got the open source
with
tools.
open source,
Better way.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And thirdly, um, actually, trust is now no longer just about you know, natural instinct. It's really about how do you then actually go a step further and verify. It's actually moved not just to you trust something at the first contact. It's that individuals, before they even engage, they want to verify that what they're seeing is important. So trust, or rather that it is authentic and it is purporting to be what it is, right? So trust fundamentally becomes a scarcity in an AI generated economy. And what I say now, I mean, earlier I spoke about the profitability paradox, where it's actually not just about the adoption of AI, but it is also about how do companies create competitive advantage. And trust has become that differentiator now that actually is very much related to how organizations create competitive advantage. Because ultimately, if you are a bank providing a service, it's no good if your consumers or customers simply do not adopt the service because they simply can't trust it. So trust is that fundamental in the AI world, and that's how much it's shifted. And yeah, so it is absolutely fundamental.
And I mean, are you doing anything with blockchain technology? I think, one of the key ways of identifying truth in the future is is it going to be on a blockchain from a reliable source, from a key network provider? Are
Yeah.
you looking at any of that sort of tech?
So, I mean, we experiment with various technologies, right? But as I said, for us, while artificial intelligence is definitely how we really power our back end, actually the community element is so much stronger, because with 500 million users across the world, we're able to surface even local nuances, right, in terms of trust. And that goes back to the human capital paradox, by the way, that I spoke about earlier, because ultimately human beings are those that are there to contextualize and provide a lot more context to foundational models that are actually developed in global north and areas. And so the key thing is, how do you give that foundational model more context? And we do that primarily through our community. And yes, of course, we experiment with various technologies, but they're not necessarily, and it's a combination of things. And this comes back to what I spoke about earlier in terms of adaptation, that it's not just the adoption of AI or the adoption of a specific technology. It's really how all of these things work together to create the specific competitive advantage.
I love that, and I think I love this whole idea of these different types of paradoxes that you speak about. And let's just go into the profitability paradox a bit. You know, we're seeing these businesses invest billions into AI, yet many are still struggling to generate meaningful returns. You know, what is the ROI on all of these tokens? Are you token maxing, or are you just, you know, what are you trying to do
Exactly.
with all of that? So
Exactly.
what do you mean by this profitability paradox?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I took this profitability paradox so seriously that it's now part of my doctoral research studies, by the way, Mick.
Wow. I
So
follow a lot of guys that talk about it. It's a super interesting topic at the moment.
it is a super interesting topic, but I think it comes back to the concept of adaptation. And I think everybody's talking about adaptation at this point. But one of the main reasons why adaptation is so critical is actually because that's how history has evolved. That's how evolution that's how we've gotten here in the first place. Adaptation is nature's oldest strategy. And so we should actually be a little bit more humble as human beings and figure out, if nature and earth has survived so long through adaptation, what are the things that we should be thinking about? What are the lessons that we can learn about adaptation? But from an organizational perspective, adaptation is not just one thing. It is how the entire organization is put together. And so uh, I believe one of the main challenges that is really standing in between organizations harnessing artificial intelligence, or even any other technology that has come before, is just one dimensional thinking of, this is a technology, we need to adopt it. um, an organization is made out of people, it's made out of systems, it's made out of a culture, a way of thinking. It's made out of an ability to sense the future, and all of that really sits at the helm of leadership. So at the end of the day, adaptation and navigating artificial intelligence is really about how leaders lead, how they have a 360 view instead of a one-dimensional view. So I've seen many, for example, organizations talk about they've appointed a chief of AI, or a CIO who's now going to be responsible for the entire AI strategy. It's great to have one component of the adaptation piece, but it's also to think about the fact that it is about how those leaders actually lead in the first place. Is an organization an open organization? Is it an inclusive organization? Do all ideas matter? Is it an organization primarily driven by one central figure, or is it an organization where learning happens and ideas come from multiple areas? And that is another piece of the puzzle in terms of how organizations learn, how organizations innovate, and how organizations achieve strategic renewal. The other part of the puzzle is, what are the organizations' processes? Do those processes, are they fit for purpose? Do they speak to each other? Or are we sort of taking artificial intelligence and sort of plugging it into processes that are really built for an industrial revolution, where things were in silos and it was really about maximization of productivity through the division of labor? Or is it now, how do we share knowledge a little bit more, create more generalists, and those processes are a little bit more dynamic in terms of whether it is touch points with customers, data collection, and the ability to give feedback loops. And that's another point. Are those processes really creating a space for organizations to learn? So adaptation is multiple lenses, and I'm sure that there are going to be many other studies that come out and sort of try and map a model forward in terms of what organizations should be doing. But that's absolutely the profitability paradox. In one area, you're seeing increased productivity, but on the other hand, you're not seeing it culminate at a profitability or return on investment or even competitive layer.
Yeah, and it's such an exciting space. I think within the next couple of months we should be seeing a lot more announcements of profitability coming from using AI within these big large enterprises. Otherwise, they're definitely going to be cutting budgets across the board. So it's a really interesting space to follow and to track. In terms of Truecaller, how does a trusted communication platform like you guys actually improve business outcomes?
Yeah. So, I mean, earlier I said that we care about tomorrow's communication. So ultimately, we found that there is a deficit in trust. And so tomorrow's communication, which includes AI-enabled or AI-driven communication, really requires, rethinking. And a lot of our value propositions rethink what that communication should look like. We believe communication should be smarter, not a lot of it, not quantity based, but intelligence based. So it must be smarter. It must be safer because, as I said, trust really is fundamental in terms of an AI-driven economy. It must be more efficient, right? So it's no longer really about how you get various agents to call multiple customers multiple times. It's really about how do you then bring efficiency into business communication. And so for us, the communication layer is really that layer where we believe is the place where enterprises meet individuals and individuals get to speak to each other about the value propositions from various enterprises. So it matters that that communication is verified. So individuals are able to look at that call or that point of communication as this is a verified business call. I'm empowered enough to know what the product is about, what the reason for the call is. I'm empowered enough to go back to a space and verify that this enterprise is who it says it is and to interact with the technology. I'm empowered enough to ask for this business to call me at this point in time through a call me back function, and they will call me. And that's exactly what we do with our verified business offering. And it's not just essentially for businesses to really keep safe and protect themselves from spoofing, but it's also about how do they differentiate themselves, to reach customers and to create that trusted environment. At the same time, it's about enabling that word of mouth communication between individuals. And that's why we're able to say, as a community, go onto the app, keep each other safe. You are essentially each other's digital neighborhood watch. And so ultimately, we really rethink how communication happens. And ultimately, at the end of the day, trust is what underpins that communication.
Amazing. I've noticed when you sometimes make calls now, there'll be a message and it will say, "Is this leave your name and who are you from?" before to see if that someone will speak to you. Is that from you guys? That feature?
So we've got AI call assistant, which essentially acts as your personal assistant. You can decide whether it is that you want it to answer your calls, or where you see spam signals, right? Where it receives spam signals. And so what it does is it will answer on your behalf. It'll say, "Hi, I'm Mick's personal assistant. What is the reason for your call?" Then the other person on the other side will say, "Hey, I'm calling Mick because I want to create. I'm calling from the doctor's office, right?" And
Yes.
then it will continue to probe further and send you a notification to say, "Hey, I'm on the call with, so and so. Would you like to take the call?"
Amazing.
And essentially, at the end of the day, what you get from that call is call recording, a clearly recorded call, and transcribed, and a summary of the call to say what the call was actually about. So it does multiple things. So firstly, it does essentially screen out whether this is a genuine call or not. But then secondly, it really does act like your assistant in the sense that if you really want a message, you can go back into the call, listen to the call, and respond accordingly. So yes, that's definitely from us. It's not voicemail. It's an interactive,
Unbelievable. Wow.
it's an interactive call screening feature.
Now, you talk about your third paradox is human capital. And looking towards Africa's future, what should leaders listening to this now be thinking about today?
Yeah, so I believe that Africa has again another opportunity to leapfrog. When we think about Africa, we always think, how does Africa leapfrog? And we've seen how with mobile technology, Africa has really the leaps and bounds that Africa has taken with mobile technology, including financial inclusion and so on. So there are all those aspects that matter in terms of our context. I think what matters from an African perspective is that leaders need to be thinking about AI and our young African demographic. Because at the end of the day, Africa's population is growing the fastest. We know this. A lot of people have spoken about this in the world. Africa has a youthful population. And so we've got young people that are going to really be walking around either as consumers in the future or as job creators and so forth. So for us, we should be thinking about artificial intelligence and how it augments human capital as opposed to how it replaces human beings in the workplace. That matters because firstly, we've got a context that is unique. But secondly, it matters, as I've shown, how we use both our 500 million users as well as artificial intelligence. It creates a different source of competitive advantage that is unimagined. And as I said earlier, it's not really about the adoption of AI because everyone's got access to the same sort of models. It's really about how do you start to create your own unique competitive advantage that's going to work in your context that might even be exportable to other contexts. And so for me, the human capital really is about how leaders start to think about solutions and ways in which they adapt the organizations to harness human capital, to augment it, to be part of its competitive advantage, and to create large communities like we've created ourselves.
Unbelievable. I think just on that point, the Africa, I think Africa, Nigeria alone had more births than all of Europe combined, and Russia. Europe and Russia.
Well, there you have it.
Nigeria had more births in 1 year. So
There you have it.
it's growing at a phenomenally fast pace.
Right.
And we teach the youth about digital literacy. Do you think we should bring in this idea of teaching trust literacy?
Yes. So let's think about what trust literacy will then do, right? Because ultimately, in a world in which everything looks real, there should be critical thinking that really youth are empowered with, and not just youth, but all people. We should be asking sort of a set of questions. Can I really trust this? Where does it originate from? Where is a place that I can go to verify it? What have other people said about it? And it matters what other people have said about it because I think it was Yuval Harari who actually wrote a book about how human beings have been able to survive for so long. We've survived so long because we've got the ability to gossip, put it simply. And so actually at the end of the day is that we should be able to figure out what are other human beings saying about what I'm seeing. And there is a study that found that, and I forget who, I think it's the Global Anti-Alliance, and the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, and they found that 98% of South Africans still go and verify. They absolutely go verify. They try verify whenever they receive communication. But I think it's literally using both technology and your community to make sure that that verification stacks up. When you're on your own, it's very difficult to figure out what is real and what is not. But when you've got a community of people that you can lean on and trust, that becomes a lot better. And that's exactly what we provide, by the way, across the world with our 500 million users acting together, to keep each other safe, as well as technology from an artificial intelligence perspective. But certainly, trust should be almost trust literacy or verification literacy should be almost second nature, because it is almost similar to critical thinking, right? And asking and problem solving, right? And asking what is real, what can I trust, how do I know this for sure? Those are all real questions that matter, in terms of problem solving and in terms of critical thinking.
Love it, love it. It's like Truecaller's got this swarm intelligence from this massive human community.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's very difficult to, and what I always say is, it's a lot of human beings that then come out and say, I've been defrauded by this number, or I've been defrauded by a particular action. And so it's very difficult to ignore those people. You could say, oh, well, is it just another AI? But it's very difficult to ignore the human experience. Yeah.
And I mean, what role should governments and educators and business play in building trust?
I believe trust is an ecosystem. Especially, it should be an ecosystem approach. As a value and as a requirement, I think people need to sort of understand what the artificial intelligence economy requires most. We've already spoken about cybersecurity threats. We've already spoken about um, just the human experience of having to verify everything you see. And so we should all get to a point of understanding that ultimately trust as a value and as a phenomenon is now the new sort of scarcity. And so the question should be then on everyone's mind, how do we create an ecosystem around that? How do we make sure that from a digital perspective, people are protected? How do we make sure that from a regulatory perspective, people are protected? How do we make sure that the people that have the solution are able to participate and offer that solution, while on the other end protecting individuals, and how to make sure that this ecosystem functions? It's not, I don't think it's a space, and recently I think Elon Musk also said it in his interview, it's very difficult for government, any one government individual to completely police artificial intelligence, because firstly, you need the right skill set, etc. We're not saying they shouldn't, but what we're saying is they should definitely be, at least what I'm saying is there should be an ecosystem approach where there's a space for every individual. And it's really about how this ecosystem is coordinated and really has enough inputs from the various stakeholders so that this ecosystem keeps everybody safe, keeps everybody advancing, and really does make sure that we are able to reap the economic rewards of artificial intelligence or, our collective intelligence.
I think that there's some really great points and insights in there. It's really, it's about collaboration, and we need the right
Yes.
regulation. We need people to be educated on all of these risks ahead of us. And just one final question, then I'm going to go to a lightning round. I'm going to ask you a couple of quick fire questions.
Okay,
So,
cool.
If you had one message for CEOs building AI first organizations today, what would it be?
Don't get rid of people. It feels like self-preservation. It really does. But don't get rid of people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, adaptation is not just the question to ask with artificial intelligence is not how quickly should I get rid of my staff or my employees. It's more around what is the value that you think you need to create in the future. Ultimately, the customer is at the center of that. So ultimately, the customer is the one person who's going to judge whether your service is worth consuming or not. And that ultimately comes to whether the customer trusts that. And part of that adaptation process requires people, requires human touch, requires the ability for people to trust what they are consuming, and for them to have explainability in terms of what it is that they're consuming. So at the end of the day, artificial intelligence, the first question should not be how quickly do we get rid of people. The first question should be, what does value look like in this artificial intelligence driven society? Who determines value? Ultimately, people at the end of the day.
Absolutely agree. It's you need to have humans in the loop deciding on human issues. At the end of the day. Okay, so to end off, I'm going to give you some lightning quick questions, and if you could just give me quick answers before we close out. It's been a thrilling conversation. So,
Awesome.
Tell me, what do you think is the biggest AI opportunity for Africa?
Yeah, I mean, AI opportunities for Africa are endless, right? I mean, you probably would have had guests that tell you about healthcare needs transformation, agriculture needs transformation. So, for us, in terms of the application and the value that we create, definitely, I think Africa is a space where we can test some of these use cases from an artificial intelligence perspective, but in terms of how we redefine value in these areas. So, yeah.
And the biggest AI risk?
The biggest AI risk has to be fraud activity. I spoke about that. Unfortunately, it's fraud. It's not being. It's the ability. It's actually misinformation. Things impersonation, fraud, things seemingly looking like they are something, but they're actually something different. So that's really the highest risk for me.
And one habit, in your opinion, that every South African should develop?
Curiosity. Curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. Get curious, ask questions, don't stop, connect the dots on your own. Um, Artificial intelligence works well as a thought partner. Artificial intelligence works well because you're able to test some of your ideas. That's from a usage perspective, but from a how do we drive AI forward as well as Africans? There's definitely a space for us to figure out where in that artificial intelligence value chain do you want to play. Currently, artificial intelligence limitations include energy. Africa is blessed with solar energy and so many other resources. There's a conversation around how do we develop a value chain around AI from a critical minerals perspective. So on the one hand, there's the usage of AI, but on the other hand, there's definitely an opportunity to drive the artificial intelligence revolution itself. Whether it is we're focusing on different elements of that value chain from an energy perspective, from a critical minerals perspective, from how we even use our young people as competitive advantage, like I said earlier.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much. I think what today's conversation reminds us is that AI isn't just transforming technology, it's transforming trust. In a world
Yes.
where almost anything can be generated, verified, cloned, or manipulated, trust may become the most valuable currency in the global economy. The organizations that succeed won't simply just build smarter AI, they'll build trusted AI like what you're doing at Truecaller. And the countries that thrive won't only invest in technology, they'll invest in the systems, education, and leadership needed to ensure that people can trust the digital world they're entering. Mmathebe, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. To everyone watching, the future won't belong to those with the most AI, to belong to those who build the most trust. So let's keep building Exponential Africa. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.